Good morning and afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to our very first session of Artlogic Connect 2024. My name is John Duff, and I am the Director of Marketing here at Artlogic, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here. The response has been nothing short of phenomenal, with over 3,000 registrations from across the globe for our very first online conference. It's clear there is a shared desire to connect, collaborate, and inspire together. And that's exactly what we set out to do with Connect. It's all about a space where the art world can come together, spark fresh ideas, and help shape what's next to come and what we can do in 2025. Over the next 3 days, there are 12 panels with over 40 speakers. So if you still haven't signed up for some upcoming sessions, there's still time. For those of you who are new to Artlogic, we're the platform that's been helping to transform the art world for over 30 years. Since 1994, we partnered with some 5,000 art businesses, and today we work with more than 12,000 users worldwide, empowering galleries, artists, and collectors to streamline their operations, their sales, and marketing into one platform, saving them time, helping them to generate new sales, and ultimately give them time back so they can focus on what matters the most, which is what we all know is to be the art. Thank you for joining today's session, A Brave New Art World, Building Community and Narratives in a Digital Age. But before we begin, we have a few quick housekeeping notes. It's time to keep your arms and legs inside the ride. And today's session will include a panel discussion lasting approximately 30 to 45 minutes, followed by a live Q&A. So if you do have any questions that come up during the session, please pop them into the Q&A box. We're going to try and go through as many as possible towards the end. But please take a look at them. If they inspire you, pop some more questions in. And if you do need to step away at any time or want to revisit the conversation later, don't worry, as all the sessions are being recorded, so you can watch them on demand in a couple of days after the conference has finished. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, who will guide us through this exciting discussion. Katy Wickremesinghe is an art world expert and founder of the Wick, a content hub connecting the culturally curious with the art ecosystem. With a focus on cultural advocacy, she serves as a trustee for key institutions, diversifying the art world and platforming new talent. Please join me in welcoming Katy. And with that, I'll hand over so she can get us started.
Thank you so much, John, for the kind introduction. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you today to host this exciting conversation, which is about a topic which we know is fast transforming, not just the wider world, but particularly the art world, which many of us are operating within. So building communities and narratives in a digital age. And I'm super excited that for this session, we have some absolute game changers and leaders in their fields. We have Ekow Eshun, a celebrated author and curator. He was the first Black editor of a major magazine in the UK and went on to be the first Black director of a leading institution at the ICA. He's chairman of the Fourth Plinth, overseeing Britain's foremost public art programme, and as well as staging acclaimed exhibitions from the UK's National Portrait Gallery to Ghana and in the US, he's also the author of Strangers Out Now. Carrie Scott is a London-based curator, art historian, and TV presenter with over 2 decades of global experience. She's curated exhibitions worldwide from South Korea to London to New York and has long-term collaborations with leading artists such as Nick Knight, Bindi Vora, John Pawson, and most recently, she founded Scene, a platform championing artists' voices, emerging talent, and bringing some much-needed transparency to the art world. Finally, we've got Nick Sargent, the CEO of the Art newspaper. He joined in 2023, bringing to the role more than 2 decades of publishing and business commercial experience. He's a leading professional who served at the global media company Condé Nast. And before that, he was publishing director of GQ and Wired Media. And in these roles, he's achieved growth over several brands and platforms from print, online, podcast, videos, and prior to this, worked at The Economist. So I'm going to invite all our panelists to join us just now and to kick off the conversation. We haven't got a long period of time, so I'm going to dive right in because you're all doing such an amazing amount in the art world in terms of connecting and bringing everything together. So Nick, I wanted to start with you. You've obviously started from a very broad publishing base from luxury lifestyle and Condé Nast and moved much more into an art market specific role now heading up the Art newspaper. How has your approach shifted and how are you seeing a kind of changing need in some of this kind of niche publishing market expertise?
Thanks, Katie. I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, first of all, we're talking about cultural media, and I just think as we're kicking off here, I think it's incredibly important to express the vital role that media, cultural media plays, whether it's in terms of TV or art or anything else. You know, we support the creative industries who, you know, there is turbulent times. You know, it's our role to support the industries, to make sure we encourage young artists, to give them platforms that we can cover content, we can cover what they produce, and also to maintain and grow commercial interest in all the creative arts and the art sectors. So I think the first thing to say, whether we're in luxury, whether we're in art or anything else, you know, we're in a position of responsibility in terms of maintaining interest and providing exposure to artists across the world. So for me, my attitude to that much hasn't changed. I think it's more important than ever. Moving from Condé to the art world, I think what's astounding is the breadth and the truly global nature of the art world at the moment. And, you know, I'm a relatively new arrival compared to the other two panelists. But I think, you know, what I've realized is there's a huge amount of moving parts, and it really is a global market. And I think it's got much more breadth than fashion, fashion and lifestyle, as one would speak about them. And I think what's also important and noticeable is the range of voices, the diversity of artists, the global reach that the art world has. And I think I don't think my approach has changed. I just feel that the importance of what we do around the art world in being a sector-based newspaper as we are, a specialist, is really, really very important. I think not only are we looking and reporting on the art world, but we're profiling artists. We talk about public sector funding, we talk about private sector. And I think for us, we just make sure, and it's incumbent on us to make sure we give the very best and most professional editorial that we can to the market. And we're providing platforms ranging from podcast to digital to video, to both B2B and B2C. And I think that crossover of the consumer and the business is very important. And I think, as I say, you know, we need to be sure that as a newspaper, we're offering what our readers would like. And I think we have to also offer that, not just in London and the US, but also we have to make sure that our other newspapers in Russia, in Japan, in Hong Kong, we contribute local knowledge from local contributors about local artists. So we're not just overlaying what we produce in London into other regions. We're making very sure that the regions we talk about, we have local expertise in those. So I think we're global and local. And even though it's a sector-based title, I really do think that we're incumbent on us to make sure we try and represent everybody globally, which represents the breadth of the art world.
Thank you, Nick. And you mentioned there about this proliferation of new voices, and we've really seen that not just with new technologies, but also in a post-COVID world. And one of those voices, Carrie, your own specific voice, if you don't follow Carrie on social, do click in and find her on Instagram, because she does some fantastic commentary all around the art world, but not just the art world, where art meets our life too. And Carrie, you've got such a rich experience. You've been a curator, you've worked in galleries directly with artists, and artists are your true passion in your new project and platform, Scene. So what motivated you to start Scene, and what's your goal?
I mean, how much time do we have? No, I mean, a bit like Nick, right? I started out in life, and I didn't put this in the bio that I sent to you, and it's not something I talk about a lot, but I started life at Condé Nast. I was working in New York, and kind of my dream always was to be a writer. So I went to grad school with the agenda that I was going to like write about travel from an art perspective. And then I got kind of into the art world and working in galleries and realized that actually artists need support, like big time. And I'm sure everyone in the audience is nodding their head, thinking that, but galleries don't necessarily have the time to give artists the support that they need. So for 15 years, my business was kind of focused on that. Like, how do we holistically help artists? Sure, through exhibitions, but also like, how do we give them strategic plans and, you know, the blueprints for business success? And then, as you say, kind of new voice, I was having all these, I don't want to call them intrusive thoughts, but it's kind of funny. I was having all these intrusive thoughts about like how we are failing artists and kind of how we're failing collectors, insofar as like there is no single place that's collecting artists' voices or master interviews with artists. You know, we have all this writing from years gone by when artists would take the time to write letters or write memoirs or write books, but that's not something that anyone's collating now. And so quite honestly, I was like, well, if no one else is going to do it, maybe I will. And obviously the business has expanded a bit in its thinking since then, but it was ultimately about collecting artist voices and letting them speak for themselves, because I think we can learn a ton from just listening to other people's stories, and particularly artists, because, you know, they're the center of all of this. And so often we listen to them through filtered voices. So
and you're doing, I know as well, you were one of the key voices over lockdown. We had conversations ourselves where you were really starting this early process of championing and bringing to light some of these artists that really needed that support at the time as well. And Ekow, talking about the way in which we sort of take different types of artists, not just emerging, established, public, private. You're someone who has sort of spanned, you know, all different parts of the art world. You've curated large-scale public exhibitions. You've also got a book out now called Strangers, but you're also leading things like the Fourth Plinth programme. So how are you seeing your involvement shift and change from curator to writer to speaker to platforming?
I mean, look, I think the art world being what it is, I've realized that I historically, you know, I used to run an institution. I used to run the ICA, and I've realized that for me anyway, there's more scope and there's more possibility in not being allied to a single institution. As it happens, I now work with several places, but those are for temporary periods. If I'm working on an exhibition with a museum, sometimes that takes anything from 2 to 3 to 5 years, during which time I'm working with them. But the goal is not to have a transactional relationship. The goal really is to try and have a relationship that hopefully opens up possibilities of engagement, you might say. So most recently, in the UK, I had a show with the National Portrait Gallery, as you mentioned, The Time Is Always Now, which has just most recently traveled to Philadelphia and opened at the Philadelphia Museum of Art last week. But all the way through the process of working with the MPG and in fact with Philadelphia, been trying to work not just on the layout of the show and the selection of artworks and so on, but really how we imagine and interpret and engage with both visitors, but also internally within the institution, how we can think about the possibilities raised by the show itself. So this show is a show of Black figuration, of Black artists working and depicting the Black figure. So the question for me came out, well, okay, look, how do we speak about these works? How do we speak about these works so that we don't speak about them superficially, so that we speak about them with the depth and richness and promise that those works in themselves contain? How does an institution hold that premise and deliver on the richness and nuance of those artworks for an audience that they want to reach, for a wide audience, for a diverse audience? What is the language we use? What are the ways that we summon and speak of and gather visitors and communities? How do we think in relation to this work? And for me, a lot of what I do is about trying to contextualize and trying to bring hopefully some insight into artworks. I do that through shows, I do that through writing, but the critical element, I suppose, is how can I share that perspective and have that as one of the modus operandi of how a show operates and how it presents itself to the public.
And I think that's something we all touched on actually in our pre-call, which is in all our roles, however different they are, we're now all starting to touch the artistic process or the gallery process in different ways, much more collaboratively. And Carrie, we've seen obviously this real I suppose, a shift, a breakdown of traditional systems. And that's obviously having a massive impact in the way that artists can communicate, or the autonomy, or the way that they're dealing with their shows, both institutionally and privately. And how do you think new technologies are affecting the autonomy or the voice of the artist?
Great question. I mean, listen, I think Ekow touched on it briefly there. Our collective agenda kind of has to be to attract more people to art. And I think artists are getting that. You know, for years, I'd have a meeting with an artist and I'd be like, Instagram. And they'd be like, no. And he'd be like, no, really, you need to embrace Instagram because it's you plus the audience and there's no gatekeeper. And you know, we're seeing this happen really slowly, but beautifully, kind of organically in the traditional gallery systems, where galleries are beginning to work together collaboratively. So you'll see Hauser and Wirth partner with a slightly smaller gallery system, because I think that they realize that working together is going to get more people in the front door, talking about the art, looking at the art. And so I'd almost say that the you know, tech has given artists an ability to speak directly to their audience, and galleries are realizing the power of that, and galleries now need to realize how to connect all the dots, like to use these tools to just story tell better, dare I say.
And I think, well, part of, you know, the role of people like yourself and Ekow are as very much as storytellers, as guides, as experts. And I think Ekow, talking on the expertise piece, because I think there are many different platforms out there, more than I think we all have physically time to even absorb and look at. So how do you, as experts, as tastemakers, as curators, how can we advise maybe some of the galleries listening? Like, how do they find voices, particularly in your case, Ekow, let's say, of diverse artists, of Black artists, of different types of artists, that is not tokenistic, that is organic, that is curated? How can they go about doing that in the best possible, most credible way?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth reflecting for a moment. Like, the etymology of the word curator actually comes from to care. And I think that approach of thinking about, look, it's not just about gathering people, artworks. It's not just about collecting. It's really about, look, how do you create relationships of care, of genuine engagement, of meaning, and of substance? And you know, I don't look at how many, you know, artists of color that galleries have, for instance. I'm more interested in the quality of conversation and the quality of engagement that might come to play, really, through any artist that they work with. I'm interested in how, or the galleries I admire are the ones that really have a sense of what not just necessarily the ambitions of the artists they work with are, but really, I suppose, the personal vision, the dreams, the desires, the unspoken aspects of what artists are trying to do, which is trying to discover something within themselves, trying to bring that out, trying to share that, trying to speak to that visually. And certainly my role, I think about, I'd spend a lot of time talking to artists, and I spend a lot of time trying to key into the register that they work at, which is often different. You know, lots of kind of business environments that we live in, including galleries, necessarily transactional. It's kind of very much about what someone is doing at this very moment in time. Artists tend not to work necessarily in that mode. And I'm interested in, I suppose, trying to create circumstances where that way of thinking that's more instinctive, that's more open, that's more keyed around imagination and possibility, has a say and is really at the center how we think about or situate the voice and the engagement and the display even of works by artists.
I think it's such an amazing answer, because it goes back very much. And I think it's something that we talk about in my own business at the Wick as well, is this piece of responsibility and integrity. And where do those lines, how do we find those lines, and how do we take it back to the source? And Nick, in terms of responsible voices and narratives, the art newspaper, I think, is still held up as one of those kind of, one of those key players that we go to, not just in a traditional sense of picking up the physical art newspaper when we're at art fairs, but seeing it as a source of a place where some of the most responsible voices in the art world are sitting. And how are you balancing this kind of shifting nature of what we need to do to attract, as we all agree, these new voices and new audiences, but still remaining true to the mission and goals of what the art newspaper really stands for?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I'll go back to my original point, is that we're in a position of responsibility. And as Ekow says, we care, we do care, and I think it's what our brand stands for. And I think from the top to bottom, from our editor, all of our contributors, it's incumbent on us to maintain the quality of our brand, but also to really write about artists and galleries and movements and the market from a position of strength, from a position of editorial autonomy, but most of all to be supportive to the industry and supportive of all the points Carrie and Ekow made, because the individual work that goes on to create an exhibition or to create a piece of art or work of art deserves to have coverage responsibly and measured with detail, which is, I think, what the brand stands for. And that's how we try and build our relationships with our readers and grow our readership base, because I think people do understand that we're doing it because we care. We're doing it not for commercial gain, not for anything like that, but we're doing it because we really have a genuine interest in all our contributors, what we call our collective brain. We have contributors in every country on every topic, and we maintain those because we know that if we don't produce at the highest quality, people will detect that. And once your brand is damaged, or your reputation is damaged, or people see you producing content for the wrong reasons, it's very hard to rebuild that trust again. And I think, for me, digital, obviously, it's a platform that's been around for a while now, and I think it augments what we already had and what we have. And I'm very much of the opinion it's as well as, not instead of. And I just think that your digital has to, our digital offers is a daily platform, our paper offers is a monthly platform. We have Instagram, we have podcast franchises, and they're all editorially run. The editor is the most important person in the building. And from that inspiration and that leadership and that striving for quality is what really makes the brand what it is. And I think digital can only build on that. And I think, as Carrie said, it just gives other opportunities for us to cover art in ways that we haven't been able to, in places we haven't been as good as we might have been. We cover nearly 2 million people across social, and we deliver that to the quality we would deliver the newspaper, because that's the reputation we try and build. And I think it allows people of all ages to interact with our brand on many, many different platforms. But as a media company, we have to offer every platform that people want to interact with. That's our responsibility. And as long as we make sure that we're doing that to the very highest standard, I think that's a great aim for us to keep working to. So I think digital, it's just complementary. I don't think anything's going to replace anything else. Our print title is extremely strong and our circulation is growing. So I just think that shows that people are now, perhaps post-lockdown, very happy to pick up a newspaper as much as they are to scroll online or to listen to podcasts.
I think also we're seeing this oscillation, aren't we, between the digital experience and physical experience, because we were talking before about how businesses can also enter the art world through some of these channels and different guides as well. And how are you starting to see, Nick, you've got your briefings, you've done art market briefings where you bring to life the editorial of the art newspaper. And Carrie, you're often looking at the wider world and how we can kind of bring relevance of the the art market into that world. How are you seeing this kind of shift of, I suppose, receptiveness to art world players into the wider world and in your digital space as well?
Oh, like how are our audiences respond, like non-art audiences responding?
Yes. How are they responding? Because it seems like they're responding very well from what I've seen on your work.
Thanks. Thanks. It's no, it's wild. You know, the funny thing is I think that, I mean, all of us, right? We are experts. We're not influencers, though some of us are turning into influencers because of the ability to talk to many people. We are in such a passion niche thing here, right? The art world is tiny compared to, say, music, compared to, say, the theater. And that to me screams opportunity, right? And that screams to me that we've been doing something wrong for a long time, because I think we've excluded an audience. And actually, people are really excited to learn. And I've got, you know, lots of people who have signed up for scene who are sort of first-time art enthusiasts, as it will, and they don't really know what they're doing there, but they like art and they want to learn more. And I think that is, for me, the biggest like success story, right? That we are attracting people to sit down and think about this wacky world that we find ourselves in, and what the relevance is of, say, an artist launching a huge exhibition or talking about what the fourth plinth is, right? That's shorthand to us. We know exactly what that means, but most people have no idea. And I think that I feel like we need to like back up and explain, oh, hey, the fourth plinth is this thing, and do a bit more basic, I use the word transparency, but it's not even transparency. It's like a basic education about
Translation as well sometimes, isn't it, of the areas?
Great word. Great word. Exactly. Like a translation of what we're all working so hard to do here. And just make it more accessible, more interesting, less insider, a bit more open doors policy. And then I think people do get excited about that.
Definitely. And I think it's really exciting, this word community as well, because in all your different guises, you all will have your own communities and your own followings as well. And I think, Ekow, how are you finding, because you've also started doing more digital work, more pieces to camera, and it's something, you know, we do as well, Nick's team is doing. And how can we sort of advise galleries, not just how they can work with people like yourselves, but also what can they be doing to bring their own stories and narratives to life in a more compelling way for a wider audience?
Yeah, I think the situation is that here the dilemma is everyone's short of time. You know, galleries, everyone, museums, everyone's short of time. And so the instinct is almost to say, okay, look, if we've done this before with one artist or one exhibition, let's just do the same thing again. We'll just kind of repeat that as a process. But actually, look, every artist, every artwork, every show is different. So actually, I think there's a necessary process of trying to think from the basis of the work itself about what counts, what matters, how might we speak of this thing? Where does that take us to as a creative process of interpretation? And I think that's really the thing that I would urge, really. So sometimes that takes you into, you know, obviously kind of pieces to camera and so on. But sometimes that takes you into other modes of interpretation. Sometimes that takes you into playlists. Sometimes it takes you into all sorts of different things. And I think I would like to think, even in our time-poor world, there's time and opportunity to take each project from the beginning and think about how do we really speak of this so that we are in tune with what's fundamentally exciting, inspiring, different, significant about that work.
Completely agree. And I think it's so important, this idea and words around collaboration and how we can actually bring a much bigger cast of characters for the greater good, as Carrie mentioned, bring in more people, make things more dynamic and more energetic. And Ekow, for those who actually do want to get in touch with you, how do you like to be approached? Because I think there'll be many people watching this conversation saying, how do I actually get in touch? You know, let's speak on a literal level. Can they message you on Instagram? Do you get approaches to guest curate gallery shows, to I know you've written curatorial forwards. How can people work with you?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram or there's an info address on my website. But I mean, to be honest, yeah, very straightforwardly, Instagram is actually fine. I look at that and
one of my old favorites, actually go and speak to you if they see you at a private view. So many people message me and say, I saw you, but I didn't want to say hello. I didn't want to try. I say, come and say hello next time. And I think that's the key thing. And Carrie, I think you may say the same. What would your, because I'm really aware we've got to wrap up for questions. So what would your message be to gallerists who are listening to you speaking just now?
Yeah, same. I mean, Instagram or email, always good. Stopping me in the street, always good. That always cracks me up.
Bumping into films, having a chat about art.
Exactly. Any of that.
Brilliant. And Nick, for those galleries that want to be working more with art newspapers.
Absolutely. Listen, just Instagram or info at, and obviously all exclusives treated with the greatest
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being such fantastic conversationers today. And I know we could have made this conversation 90 minutes, not 30. So I hope it's the start of many more together. But thank you for sharing and being so generous with your time.
Thank you so much. So we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. We've had a few questions popped in. So if anybody does have any questions, now's the time to start writing them. We've actually got one that's been submitted. And the question is, what are the most effective digital strategies for emerging artists to build a strong presence and connect with collectors and community in the global art scene?
I think Carrie has to start with that.
Oh boy. I started laughing when that question started being read out loud, because I'm hard at work on like a 12-month plan that we can give artists. Now, I'm laughing because one, I don't think there is a plan, right? And I think anyone that wants to sell you a 10-step program to success is selling you snake oil. But that said, there are a few things that I think artists can do, should do, need to do. Like most basically figuring out why on earth they make art and saying that in a sentence very clearly. I mean, artist statements, they don't need to be 27 paragraphs. They do need to, you need to be able to say what you do and why you do it really easily. But so we're trying to put together this kind of workbook, a 12-month plan, because I think it's so complicated. And literally the workbook, my digital strategist and I were looking at it yesterday. She's like, it's 26 pages, which was not the plan, but it is kind of that robust. So that is an answer without an answer, and mostly just a plug for our workbook that doesn't even exist yet.
Well, everyone needs to get on the waiting list for the workbook. And I think I wanted to actually chip in here because we often end up sort of speaking to artists about this as well. And one of the key things, I think, is to feel confident in showing the work. So often we kind of shy away. And I think there are two things that are starting to happen around transparency, not just with an artist, but also conversely with collectors. You know, it used to be a dirty word to say that you're a collector, and people are now putting it into their bios and talking very publicly about it. And as an artist, I think it's important that if someone goes to your digital interface, whether that be your website or social media, to actually see the art itself. It's important, yes, to see the person, but also the actual physical art, the making, the process. And I think that is a key part of it. I don't know, Ekow and Nick, if you've got additions to add in there as well, but I think the storytelling around an artist is often, for me, it's the human journey and story of an artist. It's what they've been through, it's where they're going, it's how I can relate to them. And quite often I've bought art or work with art that I didn't necessarily aesthetically initially connect with.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Katie. I think, look, and as Carrie was saying, it's not about the artist statement as this kind of abstract thing. It's really about, well, why? Why the work? What is its meaning and its significance for you as an artist, and therefore for potentially for anyone watching on Instagram or looking at your work on any other platform? The thing I'm most interested in is, can I get a sense of who this person is and what this work they're doing is for, what it means for them? And as you say, Katie, sometimes that leads you to a further assessment of the work based on the artist's own set of explorations and explanations. No one's asking anyone to kind of sing or dance around these things, but you want to get close to the work somehow. I think that's the key.
I think that's the other thing, isn't it, for galleries and people who are working with artists to allow as much exposure to the artist as possible. Because I think sometimes, which Carrie, I think, mentioned earlier, there can be sort of different layers and gatekeepers and translators. And so often the real and the raw is really where the connection happens.
Yeah, I just to further the artist statement point, I was then looking at some great artist statements to pull them out historically. And Ekow, you made me think of it again, but Agnes Martin, she said, and then made a series of work about it, where she said, "I paint with my back to the world." And it's so simple, but it answers everything that you just raised. It's like, why does she do it? Well, she's doing it for her, right? And she's doing it actually to take the noise of the world behind her away. So she's right. And you can sit with that one sentence and read it a million different ways, but you get right to the heart of her practice. So that to me is like the most crucial thing that any artist can do, is like have a killer sentence that you can say to me or to anyone in the street. Like, my art is about this, or I paint because this. And it doesn't need to be about the aesthetics of failure and, the commodification of anything. Like, we don't need words. We just need like the facts that are the driving force in your heart.
Completely. John, do we have another question?
Yes, we do. We've got quite a direct question, which is, what are your thoughts on TikTok for commercial galleries, the next platform?
Nick, are you moving into TikTok?
We do actually. I think
what is your TikTok? We need to all hunt you down.
Well, indeed, it's all there. I think it's a necessary evil. I don't mean evil in a pejorative sense. I just think that, the evolution of the media, digital social media landscape. I mean, there are ebbs and flows, and sometimes algorithms work with people, sometimes they don't, and it is quite a difficult series of platforms to navigate. But I think if it depends, because you can break it down by age groups, really. I mean, TikTok, clearly a younger demographic, non-algorithmically driven. It suggests, it builds its own journey for you as well, which I think probably in art is not a bad thing, I think, because, there's a lot of work being done for you. For me, there's elements of privacy and elements of, the T's and C's of TikTok, but I think overall it's an effective platform for spreading the word. And I would encourage anyone, I mean, back to the question before, once you've worked out your personal statements and where you are, it's just being accessible to people. And I think you've got to be on platforms that are there. And I think, it's constructive, and I think it increases your exposure, perhaps, and in markets that are maybe not primarily European either. So I think if in a global footprint, I think it's probably one of the most effective. So, I think, why not? Why not?
I think in an Asian market, it's quite vital as well in terms of.
I would say without a doubt, with Asian markets, up with WeChat and everything else. And I think we're too Eurocentric sometimes. And I think, for a lot of other, global South countries, and I think it's some people's only access to a market, because they don't have access to the gallery structure that perhaps we have in the UK, Europe, and the US. So I think on that note, yeah, it's a positive. And I think if you're going to, you've just got to be accessible to as many people and get out and be visible to as many people as possible. So it's another arrow in the quiver, for sure.
And Carrie, I wanted to touch with you on this as well, because I know, and we've talked before about this, content takes a long time. And, I know we're trailing behind on a TikTok land at the moment as well, but as in the Wick, we haven't started ours yet, but it's a key driver. It's such an important part, along with your website and YouTube and Instagram. Would you recommend that galleries have a TikTok where they're showing their artists?
Definitely. But then I'd also go one step further and say, like, why not have a Discord, right? Why not have a Reddit? Why not have there are so many ways, as Nick says, to talk to your audience and to find a new audience and to build community and to engage. And you should do it in all the ways that you can successfully, and in all the ways that you can that you enjoy, right? So for me, I do quite like picking up my phone every once in a while and saying the thing out loud that's been in my head all day, which I think is why it's resonating, because I'm enjoying doing it. But if you're someone who really likes to write and write and write and write, David Hill is a good example of this. He's got a gallery in North London. He started a Substack on photography because his photography knowledge is next to none. Like, he should be a professor. He should not just have this gallery. So he started a Substack that's brilliant, comes out once a week. I learned so much from it. And he's attracting a whole new brilliant audience. I think you find your thing, and then the people will come.
Yeah, find your thing and the people will find you. So, Ekow, do you have a TikTok? One coming soon, I'm sure.
There you go, one coming soon. Well, see, I would say, and I think that last point you made, Carrie, is a really good one, in terms of David Hill and his Substack, because I just made a note, like, don't let the medium become the master. I think the really interesting thing is to use the platforms and the networks that make sense for you, you enjoy engaging with, you enjoy being on, rather than trying to kind of work in a métier that seems like it's the right one for that particular platform, but that obliges you to kind of not necessarily be as open, as true as you might otherwise be. Basically, I kind of, at the moment, I stick to the things that I know I can flourish on. That's what I do.
I think also all of you are working within mediums that are authentically within your own voice or brand voice. And that's another key part, right? Because it does, I think, particularly with social, because it is so transparent, you can really tell when people are feeling comfortable, or if it feels false, if it feels that inauthentic. And I think it's really important that different galleries of scales, sizes, or different art world businesses or individuals find that path that feels, and often you have to try a few different things, right? And they don't all work. And we've all done things where we kind of go, we cringe as we think, oh, it doesn't quite work. But eventually you sort of wiggle your way through to a path where the communication feels right for you and in your narrative. John, do we have time for one more?
Yes, we got time. If we have time for two, we'll try and squeeze them in. This one leads nicely on to what you guys were discussing, which is, what are your favorite digital platforms to get news and analysis about the art world?
So I'm going to start that with Nick.
Well, clearly all the art newspaper platforms are my favorite. For me, again, it's about having a diet, a broad range. It depends. Are you at home on a Saturday morning? Are you on the train? What do you, as Ekow says, it's all about optimizing for the experience you want at that time. I mean, there are different moments. Sometimes there's, I podcasts I love. I find Substack's great because I have the time to listen to them when I'm in the office. For immediacy, I think Instagram, TikTok are hard to beat. But again, for me, I think it's a little bit of everything, really. I wouldn't say I had a singular favorite. Sometimes I try and avoid them altogether, and I go back to print and long reads and going to see things live, and finding my information from conversations. So I think, again, as Ekow and Carrie said, there's a moment for each of them. Each of them are optimized for a certain experience. So it really does just depend on time and mood, I'd say.
And Ekow?
I would obviously say, Katie, the Wick, which I look at every week or every time you update that, because I think what you've managed to do is think about the art world on a number of different levels simultaneously, culturally, commercially, but also with a immediacy and an openness, which I really enjoy, because it sounds like listening to and talking to you, Katie.
Thank you. That's very kind. And I promise I didn't plant that question, by the way. That has come in from the audience. And Carrie, what about you?
Yeah, I have my favorite sort of writers who I follow around. Nick, you'll be pleased to hear Tom Seymour at the Art Newspaper is one of my faves. He's a brilliant writer and just always throws a great curveball, like makes you think about something that you might not have thought about. Melanie Gurlis at the FT. I follow her around, anything she puts anywhere, whether it's on, Instagram and Tom uses Exhibit. So I still go there, unbelievably, just in case he's posted something interesting. So I kind of follow my people. Marion Maneker would be the other person. He's got a Puck newsletter that is so good if you want to look at the financialization of the art market, even though that word makes me want to vomit. It's very important sector of the art world, and so he's better than anyone. So I kind of follow the voices that are great more than the platforms, as it were.
Amazing. Well, I think that's where we will have to wrap up. But thank you all for your contributions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. A special thank you to our moderator, Katy, and our panelists, Ekow, Nick, and Carrie. Thank you all for this fascinating discussion. I know here at Artlogic HQ, it's definitely sparked a lot of thoughts, so we can't wait to kind of unpack those as the time comes. If anybody does have time, please join us in 30 minutes for our skills session, which is starting at 2:15. It's a session designed to show you some insider tips and shortcuts in our system, especially designed for registrars in the gallery. So if you have time, please sign up to that. But once again, thank you everybody for joining this panel. Thank you to our panelists, our moderator, kicking off our first Artlogic Connect 2024 session. And if you missed some of it, don't worry, we'll be sending out the recording in the next couple of days. But thank you once again, and I hope to see you in some more sessions over the next 3 days. Thank you so much
for having us. Bye.
Very much.